3 rounds left in the magazine. Maya Reeves counted them by weight alone, her fingers tracing the familiar contours of metal against nylon in the darkness that had become her only companion. The radio at her hip crackled nothing but static now, had been dead for the last 20 minutes, and somewhere in the valley below, boots crunched through underbrush with the patience of men who knew their prey had nowhere left to run. Her breath came shallow and controlled, each exhale measured against the sound of wind moving through mountain pine. Thomas had taught her that, back when breathing seemed like the simplest thing in the world. "Count your heartbeats," he'd said. "When you can hear your own pulse in your ears, you've already lost. The shooter who panics is the shooter who dies." She wasn't panicking, not yet. The voice in the darkness came again, mechanical and distorted through a loudspeaker she couldn't pinpoint. "You were good, Maya. Better than I expected, but it's over now. Come down and we'll talk. Come down and you live." Maya shifted her weight against the rock face, feeling the bite of West Virginia limestone against her spine. 72 hours ago, she'd believed this mission would be simple. Overwatch duty. 3 days of watching through glass while better trained men did the real work. 3 days of proving she belonged in a world that had spent the last decade telling her she didn't. Now she understood. There had never been a simple mission. There had only been the trap and the question of whether she'd be smart enough to see it coming. 72 hours earlier, the morning had started the way every morning started at Fort Bragg. 4:30 reveille. 5-mile run. Breakfast in the DFAC with Martinez making jokes about the powdered eggs while Park picked at her oatmeal and Webb tried not to stare at the female PT instructors like some kind of teenage recruit fresh off the bus from basic training. Maya had been cleaning her rifle when the summons came. "Staff Sergeant Reeves, report to Colonel Hale's office. Immediately." Martinez had looked up from his third cup of coffee, eyebrow raised. "You in trouble, Sarge?" "When am I ever in trouble?" "You want the list alphabetically or chronologically?" She'd flipped him off on her way out the door, but the smile died before she made it halfway across the compound. Colonel Margaret Hale didn't summon people for social calls. At 56 years old, Hale had more combat deployments than most men twice her size, a jaw that could cut glass, and a reputation for ending careers with the same efficiency she'd once ended enemy combatants in Fallujah back in '04. The office was exactly what Maya expected. Spartan. American flag in the corner. Photos on the wall of Hale with various generals and politicians, all of them carefully positioned to show her standing just slightly apart from the group, always watching, never quite smiling. Hale sat behind her desk, reading something on a tablet that she powered down the moment Maya entered. The motion was deliberate, final. "Close the door, Staff Sergeant." Maya did. The click of the latch sounded too loud in the small space. Hale studied her for a long moment, the kind of assessment that made junior enlisted squirm and senior NCOs check their uniform for defects. Maya stood at parade rest and met her eyes. 8 years in special operations had taught her that looking away first meant losing, and she hadn't survived this long by losing. "You're being loaned to JSOC for 72 hours, Hale said finally. "Overwatch only. You'll take your regular team. Martinez on the scope, Park on comms, Webb covering your 6. "Overwatch for what mission, ma'am?" "Need to know basis. Your spotter will brief you en route." Maya felt the first cold thread of wrongness snake down her spine. In 8 years, she'd never been sent into the field without a full intelligence brief. Never been told need to know like some kind of contractor who couldn't be trusted with operational details. "Ma'am, with respect, how can I provide effective overwatch if I don't know the mission parameters?" Hale's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Something that might have been regret or might have been resignation or might have been nothing at all. You'll know what you need to know when you need to know it. Right now, you need to know that you leave in 2 hours. Helicopter insert, 5 clicks from target. You'll establish overwatch on a ridgeline and maintain position until extract at hour 72. And if we're compromised, you won't be. The hostile force is minimal. Local militia, maybe 15 men with small arms. Nothing your team can't handle from range. Maya wanted to ask more. Wanted to ask why her? Why now? Why the sudden operational security for what sounded like a routine support mission? But Hale was already reaching into her desk drawer, pulling out a manila envelope sealed with red tape and a classification marking Maya had only seen twice before. Take this. Hale's voice was quieter now, almost gentle. Don't open it unless you miss your check-in at hour 68. And Maya, her eyes locked onto Maya's, and for just a moment the colonel's mask slipped. Whatever happens out there, know that I wouldn't send you if I didn't believe you could handle it. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Maya turned it over in her hands, noted the way Hale's signature crossed the seal, the way the tape had been applied with military precision. Is there something you're not telling me, ma'am? Hale stood, walked to the window overlooking the training grounds where a new cycle of recruits was learning to low crawl through mud under concertina wire. There's always something I'm not telling you, Staff Sergeant. That's what these birds mean. She tapped the eagle insignia on her collar. What matters is whether you trust that I'm not telling you for the right reasons. Maya slid the envelope into her cargo pocket. Do I have a choice? We always have a choice. The question is whether we're brave enough to make it. Dismissed. The helicopter ride west had been loud with rotor wash and quiet with unspoken tension. Martinez sat across from her, checking his spotting scope for the 3rd time in 20 minutes. Park was running diagnostics on the radio equipment, her fingers moving across the keypad with the kind of nervous energy that came from knowing something was wrong but not being able to name it. Webb just stared out the open door at the Appalachian Mountains rolling past below, green and endless and indifferent. Maya had tried to sleep, couldn't. The envelope in her pocket seemed to pulse like a second heartbeat, demanding attention she refused to give it. Not yet. Not until hour 68 if it came to that. They'd inserted at night, fast roping into a clearing 5 kilometers from the target coordinates. The helicopter had been gone in under 90 seconds, rotor noise fading into the distance until all that remained was the sound of wind through pine and the careful breathing of 4 soldiers trying not to make noise in enemy territory. Martinez took point with the night vision, leading them through terrain that seemed designed to break ankles and shred equipment. 4 hours to cover 5 clicks. That was the pace of men and women who understood that speed was nothing and stealth was everything. They'd reached the ridgeline at 0400, just as the first gray light started bleeding into the eastern sky. The position was perfect. Natural rock formations for cover, clear sight lines down into the valley below, multiple fallback routes if things went sideways. Maya had set up her hide with the kind of precision that came from doing this 100 times before in a dozen countries she couldn't talk about at dinner parties. Martinez established the spotting scope. Park linked into the encrypted command net and ran a comms check that came back green across the board. Webb took up position covering their rear approach, his rifle trained on the narrow trail they'd used to climb up. And then they'd waited. Day 1 had been reconnaissance. Maya glassed the valley below, memorizing every structure, every trail, every potential firing position. She counted 12 sentries on a standard 4-hour rotation, noted the way they moved with military discipline, not the sloppy overconfidence of militia. Watched the way they checked corners and cleared angles like men who'd been trained by professionals. Something's wrong, Martinez had whispered around hour 8. These aren't local boys playing soldier. Maya had seen it too. The way one sentry adjusted his rifle sling. The way another conducted a radio check using proper procedure. The way they all moved like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. She'd called it in. Overwatch 7 to command. Enemy force assessment revised. Recommend additional surveillance before primary mission. The response had been immediate and final. Command to Overwatch 7. Assessment noted. Continue mission as planned. SEAL element still inbound on schedule. SEAL element. So that was the mission. Some kind of extraction or direct action, important enough to pull in Navy special warfare, routine enough that they'd only assigned her team as Overwatch. Except nothing about this felt routine. Day 2 had brought more questions and fewer answers. The sentry count had increased to 18. Fresh troops rotating in from somewhere Maya couldn't see, which meant there was either a barracks underground or a staging area beyond her line of sight. She'd mapped every inch of visible terrain, looking for the source. Park had been the one to find it. Hour 36, running a signals intelligence sweep, she'd picked up encrypted radio traffic coming from somewhere beneath the valley floor, not from the surface structures, from below. There's something under there, Park had said, showing Maya the signal analysis on her tablet. Power signatures, a lot of power. This isn't a militia camp. This is a permanent installation. Maya had felt the cold certainty settle into her gut. Permanent installations meant resources. Resources meant backing. Backing meant this was bigger than 15 men with rifles, bigger than a routine Overwatch mission, bigger than whatever sanitized version of the Truth Command had fed to Hale. She'd opened her mouth to call it in when Martinez grabbed her wrist. Wait. Through his spotting scope, movement. A single figure emerging from the largest structure, flanked by 2 guards who moved with the fluid precision of executive protection specialists. The figure was male, mid-40s, walked with a slight limp that favored his right leg. Even from 700 meters away, Maya could see the scar tissue on his neck, the way he carried himself like a man who'd spent years being obeyed without question. The figure stopped, raised a pair of binoculars, looked directly at their position. Maya froze. 700 meters through mountain vegetation, there was no way he could see them. No way he could know they were there. They'd been perfectly concealed, hadn't moved except to shift positions every 6 hours, hadn't made a sound louder than a whisper. But the figure smiled, lowered the binoculars, spoke into a radio. And in her earpiece, a voice crackled to life on a frequency she hadn't been monitoring, a frequency that shouldn't have existed. Hawk 7 to nest, target confirmed on ridge, do not engage, repeat, let her watch. Maya's blood turned to ice. They knew. Somehow they'd known she was coming, known where she'd set up, known she was listening. Martinez was already packing the scope. Park was killing the radio. Webb had his rifle up, scanning for immediate threats. But Maya couldn't move, because the voice on that frequency, the voice that had just confirmed her position to an unknown enemy force, had been American. No accent, no dialect markers. Pure Midwest American English, the kind that came from growing up in Kansas or Ohio or anywhere between. Which meant this wasn't foreign militia. This was domestic. This was someone who knew how American special operations worked, knew their procedures, knew their tactics. This was someone who'd been one of them. She'd made the call to command 3 minutes later, her voice steady despite the way her hands wanted to shake. Overwatch 7 to command. Mission is compromised. Enemy force has American advisors and advanced knowledge of our position. Recommend immediate abort and extract. The response had taken too long. 30 seconds of silence that felt like 30 minutes. When command finally replied, it was a different voice. Older, male, someone senior enough that he didn't bother with call signs. Overwatch 7, continue mission. SEAL element is already inbound. Maintain position and provide support as planned. Do not break operational security. Sir, the enemy knows we're here. If we stay, we're sitting targets. Your concern is noted, Staff Sergeant, but the mission proceeds. That's not a request. Command out. The radio had gone dead, leaving Maya staring at the handset like it might offer some explanation for why she'd just been ordered to maintain a position the enemy had already compromised. Martinez had been the one to say what they were all thinking. They're using us as bait. Park's fingers had been shaking as she rechecked the radio frequencies. But bait for what? Webb hadn't said anything, just checked his ammunition count and settled deeper into his fighting position, ready to do what 18-year-olds had been doing since Valley Forge. Follow orders, even when the orders smelled like death. Maya had pulled out the envelope, the one Hale had given her with instructions not to open until hour 68. They were only at hour 43, but to hell with protocol. If someone was using her team as bait, she needed to know why. The seal broke with a soft crack. Inside, a single sheet of paper, handwritten in Hale's precise script. No letterhead, no official markings, just words that made Maya's world tilt sideways. Reeves, if you're reading this, the SEAL team is dead or captured. The mission was bait. The target is you. Intel says Crimson River PMC has a contract on, quote, female Army sniper, Montana background, unquote. We used you to draw them out. JSOC will extract you at hour 72. Your job is to survive. If you can hold that ridge for 72 hours against professional killers, you prove women belong in SOF. If you can't, they'll use your death to shut down female integration. I'm sorry. I didn't want this, but the Pentagon needs proof. Be the proof, Hale. Maya read it twice, then a third time because surely she'd misunderstood. Surely a colonel in the United States Army hadn't just admitted to using her team as bait in a political game that had nothing to do with military necessity and everything to do with Pentagon bureaucrats who needed a woman to fail spectacularly so they could justify keeping the boys' club intact. Martinez was reading over her shoulder. When he finished, he didn't say anything for a long moment. Then quietly, I knew. You knew what? Hale told me, 2 days before the mission. Pulled me aside, said there might be complications, said to keep you alive no matter what. Made me promise not to tell you. Maya turned to face him, and in that moment, 8 years of operating together meant she could read everything he wasn't saying. The guilt, the loyalty, the impossible position of a senior NCO ordered to lie to his team leader for the greater good. Why didn't you tell me? Because if I had, you wouldn't have come. And Hale was right about one thing. They need proof. Every woman who wants to do this job after you needs you to succeed. Martinez's jaw tightened, but I didn't know they were using all of us. I thought it was just you. Park had gone very still, her face pale in the dawn light. So we're what? Sacrificial lambs. Webb's voice was quiet but steady. My sister wanted to be a ranger. They told her women weren't physically capable. She believed them. He looked at Maya. I'm not leaving. If staying here and fighting proves she was wrong to believe them, then that's what I'm doing. Martinez checked his rifle. My ex-wife is going to be so pissed when she finds out I died proving a point. But yeah, I'm in. Park took longer. Maya watched her process it, saw the moment terror gave way to determination. I didn't join the army to run. She powered the radio back on. So let's give the Pentagon something to remember. Maya felt something shift in her chest. Not quite pride, not quite fear. Something harder and cleaner than either. They were giving her a choice. Run and save themselves, or stay and prove that 4 soldiers with the right training could hold ground against odds that should break them. She thought of Thomas, of the man who'd taken a scared 16-year-old foster kid and taught her that shooting wasn't about killing, it was about choosing. Every trigger pull is a choice, he'd said. Choose wisely. She folded the letter and tucked it back into her pocket. We hold until hour 72. Defensive positions, overlapping fields of fire, fallback routes planned. We make them pay for every inch of this ridge in blood and bullets. And when JSOC shows up for extract, we walk out of here alive and hand the Pentagon a victory so complete they choke on it. Martinez grinned, and it was the kind of grin that had gotten them through firefights in 3 different countries. Now you sound like a team sergeant. The next 24 hours had passed in tense silence broken only by equipment checks and position rotations. Maya mapped every possible avenue of approach, identified choke points, placed their limited supply of claymore mines with surgical precision. If the enemy wanted them, they'd have to come uphill through prepared defenses manned by soldiers who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Hour 68 arrived with sunset turning the valley into shades of copper and flame. Maya was halfway through an MRE she couldn't taste when the floodlights kicked on. Every light in the valley, every lamp and spotlight and flood, all blazing at once, turning night into artificial day and the valley into a stage. Maya's team scrambled for their weapons, sure this was the assault, sure this was how it ended. But no gunfire came, just light, blinding and absolute, and then the loudspeaker. Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves. The voice was amplified but clear. American accent, male, somewhere between 40 and 50 years old. Confident in the way men who'd commanded other men got confident, with the kind of authority that didn't need to shout. We know you're on that ridge. We know your team stayed with you. Admirable but stupid. Maya didn't move, didn't respond, give them nothing. You have 2 options. Surrender and live. Walk down here, hands up, and we'll extract you safely. Or stay and watch your team die first while you wonder if proving a point was worth their lives. The silence after was worse than the words. Maya looked at Martinez, at Park, at Webb, saw her own resolve reflected back 3 times over. None of them were moving. None of them were afraid. She picked up her rifle, ranged the nearest floodlight. 720 meters, slight crosswind from the northwest, cold bore shot. The kind of shot that separated professionals from amateurs. Maya settled into her shooting position, controlled her breathing, found the natural pause between heartbeats where the world went still, and the only thing that mattered was the sight picture and the gradual press of her finger against the trigger. The rifle spoke once, the floodlight died. Darkness rushed back into the space where light had been, and into that darkness, Maya called out loud enough for the valley to hear. You want us, come take us. The response was laughter. Genuine, delighted laughter that echoed off the valley walls like applause. That's the Maya I trained. Hello, old friend. And Maya's blood turned to ice, because she knew that voice, knew it like she knew her own heartbeat, knew it from 1,000 hours on the range at Fort Benning, from a training cycle 9 years ago when she'd been a specialist fresh out of sniper school, and he'd been the senior instructor who'd taken one look at her and said, you have a gift, don't waste it. Captain Marcus Raines, the best combat trainer the Army had ever produced, the man who'd taught her everything she knew about long-range shooting, the man who died in Yemen 3 years ago, killed in action during a classified operation, buried with full honors at Arlington. Except he wasn't dead. He was here, in a West Virginia valley, commanding a private military company that knew her name and her background and exactly how to draw her into a trap. Rain's voice came again, closer now, like he was walking up the valley toward her position. It's been a long time. I've kept tabs, watched your career. You became everything I knew you could be. Best sniper in special operations, 43 successful missions, 0 friendly casualties on your watch. He paused. But now they're using you. Set you up to fail so they can justify shutting the door on every woman who comes after you. Maya didn't answer, kept her rifle up, scanning for targets in the darkness that had reclaimed the valley. I'm not your enemy, Maya. Rain sounded almost sad. I'm offering you a way out. Come down, bring your team. I'll extract you to safety and you never have to be their pawn again. Still she said nothing, but her finger stayed indexed along the receiver, ready but not committed. Because some part of her, some small traitorous part, wondered if he was right. If walking back into a system that had used her as bait was really better than taking the hand of a man who'd once believed in her enough to train her. Martinez whispered low enough that only she could hear. Sarge, your call. We follow your lead. 1 hour, Rains called out. I'll give you 1 hour to decide. After that, I stop asking nicely and start taking. The loudspeaker clicked off. The valley fell silent except for wind and the distant sound of men checking weapons and preparing for violence. Park looked at Maya. What do we do? Maya thought about Hale's letter, about the women who'd come before her and failed, not because they weren't good enough, but because the system had been designed to break them. Thought about the women who'd come after, the ones watching from bases and training schools and high schools across America, waiting to see if this time would be different. Thought about Thomas, about the man who'd taught her to shoot and never asked anything in return except that she be better than she was yesterday. About the last thing he'd said to her before the cancer took his voice. You'll be their best or die trying. Either way, die standing. She looked at her team, at 3 soldiers who'd chosen to stay when leaving meant living, who trusted her enough to follow her into a fight they couldn't win by any reasonable calculation. We vote, Maya said quietly. Stay and fight or take his offer and walk away. This isn't my call alone, Martinez. Stay, the word came without hesitation. I gave my word to hold 72 hours. I keep my word. Park. Her hands had stopped shaking. Stay, because if we leave, every woman after us pays the price. Webb. The kid was 23 years old and looked about 16 in the dying light. My sister's watching somewhere. Can't let her down. Stay. Maya felt something settle in her chest. The fear didn't go away, but it transmuted into something harder, something that felt almost like peace. Then we make our stand here. She checked her rifle, her tone shifting into the command voice that had carried her through 8 years of leading soldiers into places where angels feared to tread. Martinez, left flank, 800-meter coverage. Park, right flank, 600 meters. Webb, center support and ammo runner. I'll take primary overwatch and call targets. Claymores are already set on the primary approach routes. We conserve ammunition, take only high-value targets, and make them bleed for every meter of this ridge. She paused, looked each of them in the eye. They want proof that women can't hack it in combat. We're going to give them proof of the opposite. When JSOC shows up at hour 72, we walk out of here with our heads high and our weapons empty, and a body count that makes them regret ever doubting us. Martinez chambered around. Now you sound like someone I'd follow into hell. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Park muttered, but she was smiling when she said it. They dispersed to their positions with the practiced efficiency of a team that had trained together for 3 years and bled together in 2 different combat zones. Maya settled into her primary hide, the M110 rifle sitting comfortable in her hands like an old friend. She'd modified this weapon herself over the years, knew its quirks and preferences the way a musician knows their instrument. 47 rounds in her basic combat load. 47 chances to prove that skill mattered more than politics, that determination beat odds, that 4 soldiers with the right training could hold ground that should require a platoon. The valley below was dark again, the floodlights killed. But Maya's night vision turned darkness into green clarity, and through that artificial sight she could see them preparing. 60 men, maybe more, moving with military precision through the valley, checking equipment, loading magazines, preparing for an assault that would come with overwhelming force and professional violence. Rains was down there somewhere, the man who'd trained her, the man who'd believed in her when the rest of the world thought women had no place behind a rifle, the man who was now commanding an army of mercenaries with orders to either capture her or kill her team. She wondered what had happened in Yemen, what had turned a decorated army captain into a private military contractor willing to hunt American soldiers, wondered if it mattered in the end. Because whatever Rains had become, whatever justifications he carried, he was standing between her and the sunrise at hour 72. And Maya Reeves had never been very good at backing down. The radio crackled. 3 hours until dawn. 2 hours until Rains' deadline expired. Somewhere in North Carolina, Colonel Hale was probably drinking coffee and wondering if she'd made the right call. Somewhere in the Pentagon, staff officers were probably placing bets on how long 4 soldiers could hold against 60. Maya checked her rifle one more time, verified her range card, controlled her breathing, and waited for the storm she knew was coming. Because in the end, that's what snipers did. They waited. They watched. And when the moment came, when everything balanced on the edge of a single decision, they made the choice that would define everything that came after. 3 rounds left in her future, but right now, in this moment, she had 47, and that would have to be enough. The night pressed in close and quiet, broken only by the wind and the sound of 60 men who thought they were hunters, not knowing they were about to learn the difference between predator and prey. Maya smiled in the darkness. Let them come. Let them see what happened when you cornered someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Let them learn the lesson that armies had been learning since Thermopylae and the Alamo and every other place where someone decided that holding ground mattered more than holding onto life. Hacksaw Ridge was about to earn its name, and Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves was going to make damn sure the Pentagon remembered it. The first mortar round hit at 0300, 40 minutes after Rains had given his ultimatum, and 15 minutes before Maya expected him to make good on his threat. The explosion tore into the eastern slope 60 meters below their position, close enough to feel the concussion in her chest, but far enough away that she knew immediately what it meant. They weren't trying to kill, they were trying to herd. Martinez was on the radio before the second round hit. Incoming fire, eastern approach. They're pushing us west. Don't move, Maya ordered, her voice steady despite the way her pulse had kicked into combat tempo. They want us to relocate. We stay put and make them come to us. The mortars fell in a pattern, walking up the eastern slope in increments that spoke to professional fire control. Someone down there had done this before, knew how to use indirect fire to shape a battlefield, to funnel defenders into predetermined kill zones. Maya counted the rounds, mapped the impact points in her mind, and understood the trap before it fully formed. They're herding us toward the western edge, she said quietly. Park, what's to our west? Park had the tablet out, pulling up terrain maps they'd memorized during their 3 days of observation. Valley drops off steep, maybe 80 meters. No good fallback routes. It's a kill box if we get pushed there. Then we don't get pushed. Webb, Claymore's still set on the primary approach. All three confirmed and ready. Good, because they're coming. She'd barely finished speaking when the mortars stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the explosions, filled with the kind of anticipation that made every sound sharp and every shadow suspect. Maya pressed her eye to the scope and began the methodical sweep she'd performed 10,000 times in training and 100 times in combat. Movement: 200 meters downslope, advancing through sparse vegetation with tactical spacing that spoke to professional training. She counted 12 in the first wave, moving in a staggered formation that gave them mutual support without bunching them into a single target. Contact front, Maya called softly. 12 hostiles 200 meters advancing in spread formation. Martinez, you have the left trio. Park, take the right pair. Webb, center support. I'll control the engagement. Her breathing slowed. Heartbeats settled into the familiar rhythm. The world narrowed to the circle of her scope, and the men moving through it with the confidence of soldiers who'd done this before and expected to do it again. She let them close to 350 meters, watched them check corners, scan for threats, move with the kind of discipline that came from years of practice. Professional mercenaries, probably former military, definitely experienced. Men who knew their business and expected an easy night's work against 4 soldiers pinned on a ridgeline with nowhere to run. They were about to learn differently. Maya found her target. Point man, moving slightly ahead of the others, rifle up and scanning. The leader, or at least the most confident. The one whose death would make the others hesitate. On my shot, she whispered, 3, 2, 1. The rifle spoke once. The point man went down like someone had cut his strings, a ragdoll collapse that meant the round had found center mass and shut down everything that mattered. Before his body hit the ground, Martinez and Park were firing controlled pairs that dropped 2 more men in the span of 3 seconds. The advance stopped. Confused shouts in the darkness, men diving for cover trying to locate the threat they couldn't see. Maya shifted her aim, found the man who was barking orders, the sergeant or team leader trying to organize a response. Second shot. Second kill. Suppress and displace, Maya ordered. Make them think we're everywhere. Webb opened up with controlled bursts, not trying for kills but laying down enough fire to keep heads down while Maya and the others shifted positions. 30 seconds of violence, then silence as they moved to secondary hides and waited for the enemy response. It came in the form of more mortars, this time landing on their previous positions, pounding empty ground while Maya watched through her scope and counted the enemy's ammunition expenditure. They were burning through ordnance fast, which meant either they had plenty to spare or they were getting frustrated. Either way, it was information she could use. The mortars stopped. Silence again, and then a new sound. Rifle fire, but not aimed at their position. Aimed into the valley back toward where the enemy had come from. What the hell? Martinez muttered. Maya understood first. They're shooting their own wounded, making sure we can't question them. That's cold. That's professional, which means we're not fighting weekend warriors. These are operators who know how to cover their tracks. The second wave came faster and smarter. 20 men this time, moving in coordinated teams with suppressive fire and bound maneuvers that forced Maya's team to keep their heads down. She couldn't get clean shots, couldn't establish the kind of firing rhythm that had broken the first assault. Claymore on the left approach, she called. Webb, trigger it when I say. She watched them come, let them commit to the avenue of approach they thought was safe. Waited until they were bunched in the natural choke point where the trail narrowed between 2 rock formations. Waited until the front man was 5 meters from the hidden mine, and the rest were stacked behind him like dominoes waiting to fall. Now, the claymore detonated with a sound like the world tearing in half. 700 steel balls turned the kill zone into an abattoir, shredding the first 4 men and wounding 3 more who'd been far enough back to survive, but not far enough to escape the blast pattern. The survivors broke and ran, tactical discipline forgotten in the face of sudden and overwhelming violence. Maya tracked the fastest runner, led him by half a body length squeezed. He went down tumbling, his momentum carrying him another 10 feet before physics and death stopped him cold. She shifted, found another target trying to drag a wounded man to cover. The mathematics were simple and brutal. 2 men moving slowly were easier to kill than 1 man moving fast. She fired. Both men stopped moving. "Keep count," she reminded her team. "We can't afford to waste rounds on corpses." Her internal tally stood at 8 confirmed kills. Martinez had 3. Park had 2. Webb had landed 1 lucky shot during the confusion. 14 enemies down out of an estimated 60. The arithmetic was improving but still brutally lopsided. The third assault came from a direction Maya hadn't expected, from above. The first indication was Webb's startled shout. "Ropes! They're fast roping from the ridge top." Maya spun, rifle tracking upward, and saw them silhouetted against the stars. 4 men descending on rappel lines from the high ground she'd thought was unscalable without climbing gear. They'd somehow gotten above her position during the night, probably while the mortars were providing distraction, and noise discipline didn't matter. It was tactically brilliant and strategically terrifying. If they secured the high ground, her team would be caught between enemies above and below, the classic hammer and anvil that had been killing soldiers since ancient Greece. Webb was already firing controlled bursts that sent 1 repelling man tumbling free of his rope to fall the last 40 feet onto rocks that didn't care about body armor or tactical training. Park got the second, a difficult shot at a moving target in low light that spoke to hours of practice paying dividends under pressure. The last 2 hit the ground and immediately went to cover, professional enough to know that standing and shooting was suicide. But professional also meant predictable, and Maya had spent 8 years learning to think like the enemy. She didn't aim where they were. She aimed where they'd have to be. The only route from their landing zone to effective cover ran through a narrow gap between 2 boulders, a natural funnel that gave them speed at the cost of exposure. Maya put her crosshairs on that gap and waited. 3 seconds. The first man broke from cover and sprinted for the gap. Maya's finger pressed the trigger with the smooth inevitability of sunrise. The man dropped mid-stride. The second man saw his partner fall and froze, caught in the paralysis of someone whose training said move and whose instinct said hide. Maya made the choice for him. 3rd kill of the night, 17th overall. Martinez was on the radio. "They're pulling back. All sectors, enemy withdrawing to valley floor." "Don't celebrate yet," Maya said. "They're regrouping. Next wave will be bigger and meaner." She checked her ammunition, 30 rounds remaining in her basic load. Martinez had 24. Park had 18. Webb had 32. Total of 104 rounds against an enemy force that had lost maybe 20 men and still had 40+ effectives. The math was getting worse, not better. And then the valley lit up again, but not with floodlights this time. With fire. Actual fire, burning in a perimeter around their position, close enough that Maya could feel the heat displacement on the wind. Someone down there had set the mountainside ablaze, creating a ring of flame that would burn toward their position with the patient inevitability of a wildfire in dry timber. "They're trying to smoke us out," Park said, and her voice had the tight control of someone fighting panic. "If we stay, we burn. If we move, they pick us off." Maya studied the fire through her scope, marked the wind direction, calculated burn rates against available fuel. The flames were spreading but not fast. Whoever had set them knew enough about controlled burns to create pressure without creating an inferno. They wanted her team moving, wanted them panicked and displaced and easy to kill. She wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. "We stay," she said flatly. "The fire will burn itself out before it reaches us. The wind's blowing west to east, and there's a natural fire break 20 meters below our position where the vegetation thins out." "You sure about that?" Webb asked. "No, but I'm sure that moving is what they want, and I make a habit of not doing what the enemy wants." The fire burned. Maya's team waited, and down in the valley she could hear Rain's voice on the loudspeaker again, closer now, like he'd moved to a forward position where he could watch the show. "You're good, Maya, better than I expected, but you're running out of time and ammunition and options. I can wait all night, can you?" She didn't respond, didn't waste breath on words when bullets spoke more clearly. Instead, she ranged the loudspeaker, calculated distance and windage, and put a round through it at 600 meters. The speaker died with a squeal of feedback, and Rain's laughter echoed off the valley walls even without amplification. "Okay," he called, his voice carrying naturally now. "We do this the hard way." The fourth assault came as dawn started painting the eastern sky. 40 men, all of them, committed to a single coordinated push that hit from 3 sides simultaneously. Fire and maneuver, suppression and advance, every technique that modern infantry doctrine had developed for assaulting prepared positions. Maya called targets like a quarterback calling plays. Martinez, 2 o'clock MG team. Park, 10 o'clock command element. Webb maintained suppressive fire center mass. Her rifle barked. A machine gunner collapsed across his weapon. She shifted. His assistant gunner was pulling the gun clear. Second shot, second kill. Martinez was firing steadily, the crack of his rifle blending with Park's higher-pitched reports and Webb's controlled bursts. The slope below them was a chaos of muzzle flashes and moving shadows, men advancing under fire with the kind of courage or desperation that made them dangerous regardless of training. Maya dropped 3 more in rapid succession. Center mass, headshot on a man trying to use a dead body for cover. Her bolt locked back on an empty magazine. She reloaded with practiced speed, 8 rounds from full to firing in under 4 seconds, muscle memory overriding conscious thought. The enemy kept coming. Closer now, 200 meters, 150, bunching up as they funneled through the natural approaches to the ridgeline. Maya could see their faces in the growing dawn light, could see the determination and the fear mixing in equal measure. "Claymore 2, she ordered. "Webb on my mark." She waited. Let them close to 100 meters, close enough that she could count the magazines on their chest rigs. Waited until the lead elements were in the kill zone and the follow-on forces were stacked behind them. "Mark!" The second claymore tore the heart out of their assault. Bodies tumbled backward from the blast, living men suddenly dead, whole men suddenly pieces. The advance wavered, broke, reformed. Officers were screaming orders, trying to rally troops who just watched their friends turn into meat. Maya didn't give them time to recover. She fired into the officers, the ones trying to organize the chaos, the ones whose death would turn retreat into rout. One shot, one sergeant clutching his chest and going down. 2 shots, a lieutenant trying to use hand signals getting his hand and most of his arm turned into ruin. The assault collapsed. Men ran, stumbled, crawled back down the slope dragging wounded and leaving dead. Maya tracked runners but didn't fire. Ammunition discipline was everything now. She'd burned through 15 rounds in the last 3 minutes. Martinez was down to single digits. Park's rifle had gone silent 5 minutes ago when her last magazine ran dry. They were winning every engagement and losing the war of attrition. The sun crested the eastern ridge, painting the valley in shades of gold and red that would have been beautiful if not for the bodies scattered across the slope like discarded toys. Maya counted 24 enemy dead that she could see. Add the wounded they dragged away and the night's casualties, and Rains had lost somewhere around 40% of his force. But 40% of 60 still left 30-plus effectives. And even with the spare magazines Martinez had scavenged, Maya's team was down to approximately 60 rounds of ammunition. Martinez crawled over to her position, moving low to avoid presenting a target. His left arm was wrapped in a makeshift bandage, blood seeping through the green cloth of his uniform. "When did you get hit?" Maya demanded. "Second wave. Shrapnel from a near miss. It's superficial." "Superficial means you can still shoot." "Yeah," he managed a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "I can still shoot, just not as many." "How many rounds?" "Six." "Jesus Park." Martinez shook his head. "She's dry. Been throwing rocks for the last 10 minutes trying to make them think she's still armed." "Webb." 12 rounds. Kid's a better shot than I gave him credit for. But Sarge," he paused, weighing his words, "we found 2 spare magazines on one of the dead rappel team members. Another 11 rounds. Brings our total to around 44, not counting what you have left." Maya did the mental math. She had 15 rounds remaining. Total ammunition, roughly 60 rounds against 30 enemies who knew the ridge's defenses were weakening. 60 rounds, hour 70 still 90 minutes away. The mathematics were brutal but not impossible yet. The mathematics had finally become impossible. She was opening her mouth to say something, anything, when the radio crackled on a frequency she hadn't been monitoring. A frequency that wasn't in her loadout, wasn't in the mission brief, shouldn't have existed. "Overwatch 7, this is Greystone Actual. We're inbound for emergency extract. ETA 15 minutes. Pop green smoke." Maya stared at the radio like it had just spoken in tongues. "Greystone Actual." She keyed the handset. "Say again, Greystone. We were expecting jackrabbit extract at hour 72. Change of plans." JSOC pushed up the timeline. "Pop smoke now and clear a landing zone." Martinez was looking at her with the expression of a man who'd just been offered a life preserver while drowning. "That's extract. We're saved." But something cold was worming through Maya's gut. Something wrong in the timing, wrong in the call sign, wrong in the way this felt like the answer to a prayer she hadn't prayed. She pulled out the mission brief Hale had given her, scanned the extract protocols. Jackrabbit was the designated call sign. No mention of Greystone anywhere in the documentation. Park had crawled over, her face smudged with powder residue and hope. "Sarge, is that our ride?" Maya's finger hovered over the smoke grenade at her belt. Every instinct screamed at her to pop it, to take the miracle extract and get her team off this ridge before the ammunition ran out and the next assault came. But Thomas had taught her to trust her instincts, and her instincts were screaming that something was wrong. "Martinez," she said slowly, "did the mission brief mention any call signs besides Jackrabbit?" "No, just Jackrabbit for extract, Overwatch 7 for us." "And Greystone wasn't in any of the documentation?" "Not that I saw." The radio crackled again. "Overwatch 7, we need that smoke. We're 3 minutes out and taking ground fire. Pop smoke now." Maya's hand closed around the smoke grenade. Her team was watching her, waiting for the decision that would either save them or doom them. 3 minutes. That's all the time she had to decide whether this was legitimate extract or Rain's final play. She thought about the letter from Hale, thought about how the mission had been compromised from the start, thought about how Rains had known everything, had predicted everything, had been one step ahead all night. Thought about the fact that he'd been a captain and she'd been a specialist, but he'd taken the time to train her anyway. Had believed in her when the rest of the world thought women with rifles were a joke. Had taught her everything she knew about reading a battlefield and thinking 3 moves ahead. Which meant he'd taught her to think like him. And if she were him, if she'd spent all night trying to capture her former student instead of killing her, what would be the perfect final trap? A helicopter extraction that wasn't real. A moment of hope that made them expose themselves, pop smoke, gather in a landing zone where they'd be easy targets for the forces that had been unable to reach them in fortified positions. She released the smoke grenade, let it hang from her belt. Greystone Actual, authenticate with code word from mission brief. Silence 5 seconds, 10. Then a different voice came over the radio, older, more familiar. Damn it, Maya, you're too smart for your own good. Rains. The helicopter noise she'd been hearing got louder, and Maya raised her eyes to see it cresting the eastern ridge. Not a U.S. military bird. A civilian model, black and unmarked, door gunners visible in the open hatches. That was a good play, Captain, Maya said into the radio. Almost had me. Rain's voice carried genuine admiration. I trained you too well, but now we're past the clever tactics and into the final math. 30 of my men against 4 of yours. 40 rounds of ammunition against unlimited supply. 1 helicopter with door guns against 4 people in fighting holes. He paused, and when he spoke again, the warmth had gone from his voice, replaced by cold calculation. Last chance, Maya. Surrender and live. You fought well, you proved your point, but now it's over. Maya looked at her team. Martinez bleeding from shrapnel wounds but ready to fire his last 6 rounds. Park unarmed but calm, ready to do whatever was needed. Webb young and scared but holding position like a veteran twice his age. She thought about what they'd already survived. 3 waves of assault, mortars and fire and professionals who should have overrun them in the first hour. Thought about 24 enemy dead on the slope, and the Pentagon officers who'd expected her to die spectacularly enough to justify shutting down female integration. Thought about walking down that ridge and giving up, letting Rains extract them to whatever private war he was fighting, abandoning the proof that 4 soldiers could hold impossible ground if they had the skill, and the will and the absolute refusal to quit. And she thought about the young women watching from bases and academies and high schools across America, waiting to see if this time would be different, waiting to see if someone finally proved that courage didn't have a gender requirement. She keyed the radio one last time. Captain Rains, with respect, go to hell. We're not going anywhere. The helicopter banked hard, door gunners opening fire, and Maya's team scattered for cover as heavy-caliber rounds chewed into the rock around them. Webb returned fire with his last 12 rounds, forcing the helicopter to gain altitude, buying them 30 seconds of breathing room. Martinez crawled to Maya's position, his face gray from blood loss but his eyes clear. We're out of moves, Sarge. Not quite. Maya was pulling gear from her ruck, items she'd carried up the ridge 3 days ago and hadn't needed until now. Emergency flares, signal mirror, and 1 smoke grenade in a color she hadn't mentioned to anyone. Purple smoke. The code from Hale's letter, buried in a paragraph Maya had almost missed. If compromise is total and extract is impossible, pop purple smoke and withdraw to grid coordinates that she'd memorized and then burned. There's a fallback position, Maya said. Colonel Hale gave me alternate extract coordinates. 2 clicks north, marked by an old fire tower. Martinez stared at the purple smoke grenade. And you're just mentioning this now? Because I didn't know if I could trust it. Didn't know if that wasn't part of the trap, too. She met his eyes. But we're out of ammunition and out of time, and sometimes you have to trust that the people who sent you into hell have a plan to get you out. 2 clicks through hostile territory with no ammo. We've got knives, we've got training, and we've got each other. Maya pulled the pin on the purple smoke. That'll have to be enough. The smoke billowed out, purple and distinctive, visible for miles. If Hale's people were watching, they'd know. If Rains was watching, he'd know that too. The race was on. Move, Maya ordered. Fire tower 2 clicks north, stay low and fast. Go. They went. 4 soldiers leaving behind their prepared positions, their supplies, everything except weapons and the determination to survive. The helicopter saw them moving, banked to pursue, and Martinez threw the last smoke grenade he had, green this time, creating a cloud that confused the thermal optics and bought them another 30 seconds. They ran, through forests that tore at their uniforms, over terrain that threatened broken ankles, moving with the desperate speed of people who knew death was seconds behind them. Maya could hear the helicopter overhead, could hear men on the ground giving chase, could hear Rain's voice on a loudspeaker calling for them to stop, to surrender, to accept the inevitable. She kept running. The fire tower appeared through the trees like salvation made of rusted steel and rotted wood. 50 feet tall, observation platform at the top, stairs that looked like they hadn't been climbed in 20 years. Maya hit the base at a dead sprint and started climbing, trusting that structure would hold, trusting that Hale hadn't sent them to a death trap. The stairs held, barely. She reached the platform with her team close behind, and from that height she could see everything. The valley below, the ridge they'd defended, the helicopter circling like a bird of prey, and vehicles, multiple vehicles, moving up the access road from the south. Rain's reinforcements or Hale's extract. No way to know until they got close enough to identify. Martinez had his rifle up, scanning for targets with the 6 rounds he had left. Park was on the radio, trying to raise anyone friendly on any frequency that might be monitored. Webb was watching the stairs, ready to defend their position with a knife if it came to that. And Maya stood at the railing, watching vehicles approach, watching the helicopter circle, watching everything balance on the edge of a decision that wasn't hers to make anymore. The first vehicle cleared the tree line. Black SUV, no markings, could be anyone. The second vehicle, same. The third, and this one had a flag, small, mounted on the antenna, barely visible at this distance, but there. American flag, stars and stripes, and Maya felt something release in her chest that she hadn't known was locked tight. Friendly, she called. 3 vehicles, American flagged, coming fast. The helicopter saw them too, banked hard, and started to withdraw. But not before Rain's voice came over the loudspeaker one final time, loud enough to carry even without amplification. This isn't over, Maya. When the army uses you up and throws you away, when you realize I was right about everything, you know where to find me. Then the helicopter was gone, disappearing over the western ridge, and the vehicles were pulling up to the base of the fire tower. Doors opened. Men in civilian clothes but military bearing stepped out, weapons ready but not aimed. And then a fourth figure, older female, walking with the kind of authority that didn't need announcement. Colonel Hale looked up at the fire tower, shaded her eyes against the sun, and called out in a voice that carried like command. Staff Sergeant Reeves, you are one stubborn pain in my ass. Get down here before that tower collapses, and I have to explain to Congress why my best sniper died falling off a historical landmark. Maya started laughing, couldn't help it. The hysteria and relief and exhaustion of 70 hours of combat compressed into sound that was half sob and half triumph. Martinez was laughing too, and Park, and even Webb managed a smile that made him look 16 instead of 23. They descended the tower, reached ground level where Hale was waiting with medics and hot coffee, and the kind of expression that mothers give children who have simultaneously terrified them and made them proud. "Report," Hale ordered, but her voice was soft. "Mission accomplished, ma'am. Ridge held for 70 hours. 4 friendly, estimated 30 enemy KIA, 0 civilian casualties. We're out of ammunition, but we're alive." Hale nodded once, sharp and military. "And you proved what needed proving." She looked at each of them in turn. "All of you did. The Pentagon wanted a demonstration that women can't handle combat stress. You gave them a demonstration of the opposite. 4 soldiers holding ground against a professional PMC company for 3 days." "That was Crimson River?" Maya asked. "Confirmed. Led by former Captain Marcus Raines, declared KIA in Yemen, but actually burned and operating as a private military contractor." Hale's expression hardened. "He's wanted for questioning on 6 different operations. You just gave us intelligence on his current location and force structure." "He got away. This time. But now we know he's alive, we know his capabilities, and we know he has a personal interest in you. That's actionable intelligence." "Is he right," Maya asked quietly, "about the army using me?" Hale was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words with the care of someone who understood their weight. "Yes and no. Yes, this was a test. Yes, you were used as bait, but no one wanted you to fail, Maya. I sent you because I believed you could succeed. The men in the Pentagon who designed this operation sent you because they believed you'd fail." She smiled, and it had teeth. "I'm looking forward to their faces when they read my after-action report." "What happens now?" "Now you go to the hospital, get patched up, and prepare for a medal ceremony that will be classified but thoroughly documented. Now every woman who wants to serve in special operations has proof that it can be done." Her voice softened. "Now you become the example instead of the exception. That's a heavy burden, but I think you can carry it." Maya looked at her team. At Martinez with his arm in an improvised sling. At Park exhausted but unbroken. At Webb who'd grown up somewhere on that ridge between midnight and dawn. "We all carry it," she said. "All of us proved it." Hale nodded. "Then let's get you home." The ride back to base took 4 hours through mountain roads that seemed too peaceful for soldiers coming off a battlefield. Maya sat in the back of the SUV, watching West Virginia roll past, thinking about 70 hours that had changed everything and nothing. Changed everything because now there was proof, documented and undeniable, that women could do this job. Changed nothing because tomorrow there would be another mission and another test and another group of people who needed convincing. But for now, in this moment, riding toward hot showers and real food and beds that didn't involve sleeping on rocks, Maya let herself feel something she rarely allowed. Pride. Not in the killing, though she'd done what was necessary. Not in the survival, though that mattered, but in the choice. In the moment when Raines had offered an escape and she'd chosen to stay. In the moment when her team had voted to fight despite impossible odds. In all the small moments that added up to proving that courage didn't care about gender and skill didn't come with prerequisites. Her phone buzzed. Service had returned somewhere in the last hour, a text from a number she didn't recognize. "You fought well. When you're ready to fight for something that matters instead of symbols, call me," followed by a number. Raines. Maya stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. But she didn't delete the number from her memory. Because some part of her, some small part she didn't want to acknowledge, wondered if he was right. If the system that had used her as bait really deserved the loyalty she'd given it. But that was a question for another day. Today, she'd proven what needed proving. Today, she'd held impossible ground and brought her team home alive. Today was enough. The SUV pulled through the gates of Fort Bragg and Maya closed her eyes, let exhaustion finally claim her, and dreamed of nothing at all. The hospital at Fort Bragg smelled like antiseptic and old coffee, like every military hospital Maya had ever been in across 3 continents and 8 years of service. She sat on the examination table while a doctor younger than Webb poked at the shrapnel wounds in her shoulder and declared them superficial with the confidence of someone who'd never been shot at. Superficial meant she could still pull a trigger, meant she'd be cleared for duty within a week, meant the Army had no intention of letting her rest when there was political capital to be extracted from 70 hours on Hacksaw Ridge. Martinez was 3 beds down, his arm in a proper sling now, flirting with a nurse who was pretending not to be interested and failing. Park had been treated for dehydration and exhaustion, then immediately disappeared into some signals intelligence debrief that would probably last longer than the mission itself. Webb was asleep in the corner, finally allowed to be 23 years old instead of a soldier holding impossible ground. The door opened. Colonel Hale walked in without knocking, followed by 2 men in suits who had Pentagon written all over them despite their lack of uniforms. One was maybe 50, graying at the temples, with the kind of posture that spoke to military background. The other was older, 60-plus, with cold eyes and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile sometime during the Reagan administration. Staff Sergeant Reeves, the older suit, said, "I'm Deputy Director Morrison, Defense Intelligence Agency. This is Colonel Patterson, J2 Staff. We need to discuss your after-action report." Maya slid off the examination table, came to a modified parade rest that acknowledged their authority without giving them deference. "I haven't written an AAR yet, sir. Just got out of the field 4 hours ago." "Then we'll conduct this as a verbal debrief." Morrison pulled out a tablet, tapped it active. "You claim to have engaged approximately 60 hostile forces over a 70-hour period." "I don't claim anything, sir. I counted bodies. 30 confirmed kills across my team, additional wounded that were extracted by enemy forces. 60 is a conservative estimate. 1 female sniper and 3 support personnel held ground against a professional military company for 3 days. Morrison's tone suggested he found this difficult to believe. Maya felt her jaw tighten. 1 staff sergeant, 1 sergeant, 1 specialist, and 1 PFC held ground, sir. Their gender is irrelevant to their effectiveness. Is it? Because this entire operation was designed to test whether female soldiers could perform under sustained combat stress. Patterson leaned forward. And your performance, while admirable, raises questions about the accuracy of the reporting. You think I'm lying? I think combat stress can cause people to overestimate enemy numbers and effectiveness. Hale's voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. Which is why I brought video evidence. She produced a thumb drive, plugged it into Morrison's tablet. Drone footage from an RQ-4 that had been orbiting the operational area at 30,000 feet. Thermal imaging that showed the ridge, showed Maya's team, showed assault after assault breaking against their position like waves against rocks. Showed the bodies afterward, cooling in the mountain air. Enough of them that even Morrison's skeptical expression started to crack. 37 confirmed enemy KIA, Hale said. Another 12 wounded severely enough that thermal imaging tracked them being carried to vehicles and extracted. 4 defenders against a force that started at 60 and ended at 11 effectives. She looked at Morrison. Still think the reporting is inaccurate. Morrison closed the tablet. No, but I think we need to discuss what happens next. What happens next, Hale said, is that my people get the recognition they earned. Silver stars for Reeves, Martinez, Park, and Webb. Immediate promotion for Reeves to Sergeant First Class. And full documentation that female soldiers can and will perform at the highest levels of combat operations. That's not politically feasible, Patterson said. If we give them silver stars, we're admitting we sent them into a trap. If we admit that, we're admitting the mission was designed to fail. Then admit it. Maya's voice was steady. Tell the truth. Tell America that you sent 4 soldiers into a political experiment and we succeeded despite your expectations. Morrison and Patterson exchanged looks, the kind of wordless communication that happened between men who'd spent years in bureaucratic trenches together. Here's what we can offer, Morrison said finally. Silver Star for you, approved and documented. Army Commendation Medals for your team, promotion to E7, and a guarantee that this operation never sees congressional review. And in exchange, Hale's voice was sharp. In exchange, this stays quiet. No media, no press releases, no using this as political ammunition for the integration debate. You proved your point to the people who needed proof. Let that be enough. Maya looked at Hale, saw the calculation in her eyes, the weighing of what could be won against what could be lost, saw the resignation of someone who'd fought these battles before and knew that sometimes a quiet victory was the only victory available. No, Maya said. All heads turned toward her. No, she repeated. You want quiet. You want this buried so you can keep having the same arguments about whether women belong in combat. I spent 70 hours being shot at to prove a point. I'm not letting you hide that proof because it's politically inconvenient. Staff Sergeant Patterson's voice carried warning. You're on dangerous ground. I'm on the ground you put me on, sir. Maya met his eyes. You sent me to die to prove women can't hack it. I didn't die. I succeeded. And now you want to hide that success because admitting it means admitting you were wrong. The room was silent except for the hum of medical equipment and Martinez's poorly suppressed cough that sounded suspiciously like laughter. Morrison stood. You have 24 hours to reconsider. After that, we move forward with or without your cooperation. He looked at Hale. Control your people, Colonel, before they say something that ends careers. They left. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a threat. Hale waited 10 seconds, then allowed herself a small smile. That was stupid, reckless, and probably going to cost you the promotion. Probably, Maya agreed, but it felt good. Thomas would be proud. Hale's expression softened. He always said you had more backbone than sense. Turns out he was right. You knew Thomas. Everyone in the sniper community knew Thomas Reeves. Best shot of his generation, better teacher than he ever was a soldier. He wrote me a letter when you were going through selection. Said you'd either be the best we ever produced or get yourself killed trying. Made me promise to keep an eye on you. Maya felt something tight in her chest. I didn't know. He didn't want you to. Said you had enough pressure without thinking you had to live up to his reputation. Hale walked to the window, looked out at the training grounds where another generation was learning to be soldiers. But I think he'd be satisfied with how you turned out. Hell, I know I am. What happens now, ma'am? Now you rest. Tomorrow we fight the Pentagon. But tonight you get to be a soldier who survived something that should have killed her. That's worth celebrating. Maya nodded, but celebration felt distant. Her mind was still on that ridge, still counting ammunition, still watching Martinez bleed and Park throw rocks because she'd run out of bullets. Still hearing Rain's voice offering escape and feeling the weight of choosing to stay. Permission to speak freely, ma'am. Granted. Was it worth it? sending us into that trap, risking 4 lives to prove a political point. Hale was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned from the window, and her eyes held something Maya had never seen there before: doubt. I don't know. Ask me in 20 years when the Army has female Rangers and SEALs and Delta operators. Ask me when the young women watching you become the example get their own chance to serve. She paused. Or ask me if you died up there, and I had to write letters to your families explaining that I sent you into a trap for the greater good. Maya thought about that. Thought about Webb's sister who wanted to be a ranger. Thought about all the women who'd been told no simply because of gender. Thought about the price of progress measured in blood and bullets. I'd do it again, she said quietly. Knowing what I know now, I'd still go. Then it was worth it, because that's what service means. Doing the hard thing because someone has to. Being the example because someone needs to see it's possible. The door opened again. This time it was Martinez, arm in a sling but grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Sarge, you're gonna want to see this. He had a laptop, pulled from somewhere, showing a news broadcast. CNN, playing footage that shouldn't exist. Thermal drone video of Hacksaw Ridge. 4 defenders holding against impossible odds. A newswoman's voice explaining that unnamed sources had leaked classified footage of a military operation that proved female soldiers could perform in sustained combat. Someone leaked the drone footage, Martinez said, about 2 hours ago. It's already gone viral, 3 million views and climbing. Hale's expression was unreadable. Who leaked it? Martinez shrugged, but his grin suggested he knew exactly who and was enjoying the chaos too much to tell. The broadcast cut to interviews. Military analysts praising the tactical decisions. Veterans calling it the most impressive defensive stand since the Alamo. A retired 4-star general stating flatly that gender had nothing to do with combat effectiveness and everything to do with training and will. And then a congresswoman, young and fierce, demanding answers about why this operation had been classified in the first place. Demanding to know if female soldiers were being deliberately set up to fail. Demanding congressional hearings and accountability. Morrison's going to lose his mind, Hale said, but she was almost smiling. Whoever leaked that footage just started a political firestorm. Her eyes met Maya's, and in that look was acknowledgement. Hale had leaked it, had taken Morrison's threat and turned it into a weapon, had used the Pentagon's own footage to force the conversation they'd tried to bury. 24 hours, Hale had said, and in less than 4, she'd made sure that silence was no longer an option. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of media attention that Maya hadn't wanted and couldn't escape. News crews camped outside the base. Interview requests from every major network. Social media exploding with debates about women in combat, about Pentagon politics, about 4 soldiers on a ridge who'd become symbols whether they wanted to be or not. Maya declined every interview, let her actions speak instead of her words, but she couldn't stop other people from speaking. Martinez gave an interview to Army Times, describing the defense in technical detail that made it clear this wasn't luck or exaggeration but skill and determination. Park talked to a women's leadership forum about making the choice to stay when leaving meant living. Webb's sister posted a video that went viral, explaining that her brother had fought on that ridge to prove she deserved a chance. And through it all, Maya waited for the other shoe to drop, for Morrison to make good on his threat, for the Pentagon to find a way to spin this into something other than what it was. The shoe dropped on day 4, in the form of orders to report to the commandant's office at 0800. Maya went in dress uniform, her ribbons aligned perfectly, her boots shined to a mirror finish. If they were going to end her career over refusing to be silent, she'd go down looking like a soldier. The commandant's office was exactly what she expected. American flag in the corner, photos of wars going back to Desert Storm, a desk that had probably seen 1,000 careers made and broken. Behind the desk sat Major General Elizabeth Carver, 3 stars on her shoulder boards, a combat infantry badge above her ribbons, and an expression that gave nothing away. "Sit, Staff Sergeant." Maya sat. Carver studied her for a long moment. "I've read every report from Hacksaw Ridge, watched the drone footage 12 times, interviewed your team, your commander, even pulled Captain Rain's service record from before he went rogue." "Yes, ma'am. And I've concluded that you're either the best soldier I've seen in 30 years or the luckiest one, possibly both." Maya said nothing. Let the general talk. "The Pentagon wants this to go away. They want you to accept a quiet medal, take your promotion, and never mention Hacksaw Ridge again. They've offered Colonel Hale a star if she makes you cooperate." "Did she agree?" "She told them, and I quote, that you couldn't be made to do anything you didn't choose to do, and if they wanted silence, they should have thought about that before sending you into a trap with cameras watching." Carver allowed herself a small smile. "Colonel Hale will not be getting her star, but she will be getting my respect for having the courage to tell a room full of generals to go to hell." "What do you want from me, ma'am?" "I want you to understand what you've started. This isn't just about you anymore. Every woman who wants to serve in combat arms is watching. Every politician with an opinion about military integration is using you as evidence. You've become a symbol whether you wanted to or not. I just wanted to do my job. And you did it better than anyone had a right to expect. But now comes the hard part, living with what that means, being the example, carrying the weight of proving that women belong in places men said we couldn't go." Carver stood, walked to the window. "I was the first female brigade commander in the 82nd Airborne. Know what that was like. Every decision questioned, every mistake magnified, every success attributed to luck or the men around me." She turned back to Maya. "I had to be perfect for 20 years before they stopped seeing my gender first and my rank second." "I don't want to be perfect, ma'am. I just want to be a soldier." "Then you're in the wrong business, because soldiers like us don't get that choice. We're symbols whether we like it or not. The question is whether we use that platform to make it easier for the women who come after us." Maya thought about Webb's sister, about Park's niece who wanted to fly helicopters, about all the young women who were watching and waiting to see if this time would be different. "What do you need me to do?" "Accept the Silver Star. Public ceremony, full honors. Let America see that courage doesn't have a gender requirement. Then go back to work. Be the soldier you've always been. Let your actions continue to speak louder than any words." "And Morrison?" "Morrison has been reassigned to a position where he can't sabotage female integration anymore. Patterson is under investigation for deliberately designing the Hacksaw Ridge operation to produce casualties rather than success." She smiled, cold and satisfied. "Turns out leaking classified footage also leaked evidence of their misconduct. Funny how that works." Maya felt something like justice settling into place. Not perfect, not complete, but enough. The ceremony happened 3 weeks later on a parade ground at Fort Bragg under skies so blue they looked painted. Maya stood at attention, while a 3-star general she'd never met read a citation that made 70 hours of terror sound like something noble and inspiring. "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an enemy of the United States. Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves distinguished herself by exceptionally valorous conduct while serving as team leader of a 4-person sniper element tasked with overwatch operations in support of Joint Special Operations Forces. The words washed over her. She focused on standing still, on not thinking about Martinez bleeding or Park throwing rocks or the moment when she'd had 3 rounds left and 60 men coming. When surrounded by numerically superior hostile forces and facing certain annihilation, Staff Sergeant Reeves made the decision to hold her position rather than withdraw to safety. Through superior marksmanship, tactical acumen, and unwavering dedication to the mission, she and her team eliminated 30 enemy combatants and successfully defended their position for 72 hours until extraction. The general pinned the silver star to her uniform. The medal felt heavier than it should. Maya saluted. He returned it. The crowd applauded. Martinez, Park, and Webb received their medals next. Army Commendation medals with Valor device, not the silver stars they deserved, but more than Morrison had wanted them to get. They stood straight and proud, and Maya felt her chest tighten with something that might have been pride or might have been grief for the innocents they'd lost on that ridge. The ceremony ended. The crowd dispersed. Maya stood alone on the parade ground, looking at the medal on her chest and thinking about the price paid for a piece of ribbon and metal. A voice behind her, rough and familiar and impossible. "Looks good on you." Maya spun, hand instinctively moving toward a sidearm she wasn't carrying, and found herself facing Marcus Raines. He looked older than she remembered from Fort Benning. Grayer, harder. The scar on his neck was more visible in daylight, and his eyes carried the kind of weight that came from years spent doing things that kept you awake at night. "Relax," he said, hands visible and empty. "I'm not here to fight, just wanted to see you get your medal." "You shouldn't be here. You're wanted by the FBI." "And yet here I am." Raines smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Turns out I'm very good at not being found when I don't want to be." Maya looked around. Security was present but distant, focused on the VIPs, leaving rather than a conversation between two people who looked like they belonged. "Why?" she asked. "Why set the trap if you didn't want me dead?" "Because I wanted to give you a choice. The Army used you as bait. I wanted to show you what that looked like, let you see how little they value you beyond your utility. Thought maybe you'd be smart enough to walk away." "I did walk away, just not in the direction you wanted." Raines nodded slowly. "Thomas trained you too well, taught you to be stubborn even when stubborn gets you killed. He saved my life, gave me purpose when I had nothing." "I know, he was my friend too. Called me 2 weeks before he died, made me promise to look out for you if the system ever turned on you." He paused. "I kept that promise. Maybe not the way he intended, but I kept it. By trying to kill my team. By giving you a way out before the Army did to you what it did to me. Used me up, burned me when I became inconvenient, left me to die because admitting I was alive meant admitting they'd screwed up." Raines' voice was bitter. "You think that medal means you're safe. You're not. You're useful right now. But the moment you stop being useful, they'll discard you like they've discarded every soldier who became politically inconvenient." "Maybe," Maya met his eyes, "but that's not a reason to stop serving. That's a reason to change the system from inside." "You can't change the system. I tried for 20 years. All you can do is survive it or escape it." Thomas didn't escape. He served 30 years and died proud of what he'd done. Thomas died of cancer eating him from the inside, alone in a VA hospital, decorated and forgotten. Raines' voice softened. "Is that really what you want?" "I want to be a soldier. I want to do the job I trained for. And if that means fighting the Pentagon as much as I fight the enemy, then that's what I'll do." Raines was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled something from his pocket, a card, plain white, with nothing but a phone number written in pen. "When you change your mind, call that number. I can offer you something the Army never will. A chance to fight for reasons that matter instead of politics. A chance to choose your own missions instead of following orders from men who see you as expendable. I won't change my mind. You will, everyone does eventually. But when you do, I'll be waiting. He turned to walk away, and Maya called after him. Rains. He stopped. If I see you again, I'll arrest you, or shoot you, whichever comes first. Rain smiled, genuine this time. That's the Maya I trained. Never compromise, never quit. He nodded once. Take care of yourself, soldier. Then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd like he'd never been there at all. Maya looked at the card in her hand, memorized the number, then tore the card into pieces and let the wind take them. Some choices were easy. Some doors stayed closed no matter who offered to open them. 6 months passed. Winter turned to spring. The news cycle moved on to other stories, other scandals, other symbols. Maya went back to work, back to training, back to being a soldier instead of a statement. But things had changed in ways both obvious and subtle. Female enrollment in sniper school jumped 40%. Ranger School saw its first class with more than token female representation. The Army quietly changed policies that had been barriers for decades, removing obstacles that had nothing to do with capability and everything to do with tradition. Maya watched it happen and felt both pride and exhaustion. Pride that her actions had mattered, exhaustion from carrying the weight of being the example. She was cleaning her rifle in the team room when the call came. Colonel Hale's aide requesting her presence at 1700. No explanation, no context, just the request that felt like an order. Maya showed up early, boots shined and uniform pressed, ready for whatever came next. Another medal ceremony, another political briefing, another reminder that she'd stop being just a soldier and become a symbol whether she wanted to or not. Hale's office hadn't changed. Same flag, same photos, same desk that had seen 1,000 difficult conversations. But Hale herself looked different, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. Sit, Maya. She sat. Hale pulled out a folder, classified markings across the front. I have a mission for you. Real one this time, not a political trap. Where? Somalia. American journalist captured by militant group. Pentagon won't authorize official rescue because it's too politically sensitive. But there are people who believe we don't leave Americans behind regardless of politics. People like you. People like me. Hale opened the folder, showed satellite photos of a compound in desert terrain. It's a small team operation. 4 operators in and out before anyone knows we were there. Off books, no official support, complete deniability if it goes wrong. And if it goes right? If it goes right, an American comes home, and the people who captured her learn that some mistakes cost more than they're willing to pay. Maya studied the photos. Estimated enemy force, likely defenses, approach vectors. Her mind was already planning the mission, calculating odds, identifying risks. Who else is on the team? Martinez, Park, Webb. They volunteered before I even asked. Said something about unfinished business and proving Hacksaw Ridge wasn't luck. When do we leave? 72 hours. But Maya, this isn't an order. I can't order you to take an off-books mission. This is a request from someone who believes the rules sometimes matter less than doing what's right. Maya thought about the journalist in that compound, thought about being abandoned by the system you trusted to protect you, thought about Thomas and his lesson that the hardest shot wasn't the one you took, but the one you couldn't walk away from. I'm in, she said, but on one condition. Name it. When this is over, no more symbols, no more ceremonies, no more being the example. I just want to be a soldier doing the job." Hale smiled. "I can't promise that. You are the example whether you like it or not, but I can promise that I'll never use you as bait again. Your missions will be real, your risks will be necessary, and your team will always know the truth." "That's enough." "Good, because we've got 72 hours to plan an operation that's probably impossible and definitely illegal." She handed Maya the folder. "Welcome back to work, Sergeant." Maya took the folder, felt the weight of it, the responsibility, the choice she just made to walk back into danger when safety was an option. But safety had never been the point. Service was the point. Doing the hard thing because someone had to. Being the example because someone needed to see it was possible. She stood, saluted, and Hale returned it with the kind of respect that couldn't be faked or forced. 72 hours, Maya confirmed. "We'll be ready." She left the office, folder under her arm, and walked across the base toward the team room where Martinez would be making coffee and Park would be checking equipment, and Webb would be pretending he wasn't nervous about the next mission. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. Rain's voice. "I hear you're going to Somalia." "How did you know?" "I know everything that matters. The offer still stands, Maya. Work with me, not for them. Choose your own missions instead of following orders from people who'll deny you existed if you die." "I already made my choice." "Wrong choice, but I respect it. Good luck in Somalia. Try not to get killed proving a point." He hung up before she could respond. Maya stared at the phone, then deleted the call from her history. Some conversations weren't worth remembering. The sun was setting over Fort Bragg, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded her of fire on a mountain ridge. 72 hours on Hacksaw Ridge had changed everything and nothing. Changed the policies and the politics and the possibility for women who came after. Changed nothing about the fundamental truth that soldiers went where they were sent and did what needed doing regardless of odds. Maya walked into the team room. Martinez looked up from his coffee, grinned. "Heard we're going to Somalia." "Heard the same thing." "Gonna be dangerous." "Everything worth doing is." Park was already planning, tablet out, mapping routes and calculating variables. Webb was checking ammunition, his movements efficient and confident. 6 months ago he'd been a nervous kid. Now he was a soldier who'd held impossible ground and learned that courage was a choice you made every day. The team gathered around the table. 4 soldiers who'd survived something that should have killed them. 4 people who'd chosen to stay when leaving meant living. 4 examples who'd proven that skill and determination mattered more than gender or politics or the expectations of people who'd never walked into fire. Maya spread the mission folder on the table, started briefing, started planning, started doing the job she'd trained for and chosen and would keep choosing until the day came when she couldn't anymore. Because that's what soldiers did. They served. They sacrificed. They proved with actions instead of words that some things mattered more than safety or comfort or the easy path. Outside the window, the last light faded from the sky. Somewhere in Somalia, an American journalist waited for rescue that might never come. Somewhere in the Pentagon, staff officers were probably debating whether 4 soldiers could pull off a mission that regulations said required a platoon. And somewhere on a ridge in West Virginia, the ground remembered 24 hours of violence and 70 hours of stubborn defiance. Remembered 4 soldiers who'd held when holding should have been impossible. The ridge remembered, and the army would remember too, not just the mission or the medals or the political changes that followed, but the lesson that 4 soldiers had written in blood and bullets across 3 days in hell. That courage had no gender. That determination beat odds. That sometimes the most important shot wasn't the one you took, but the one you chose to take when every instinct screamed to run. Maya looked at her team, saw the same resolve reflected back 3 times over, and felt something like peace. They had 72 hours to plan an impossible mission. And if Hacksaw Ridge had taught them anything, it was that impossible just meant no one had been stubborn enough to succeed yet. The work continued, the mission called, and Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves answered because that's what soldiers did. They answered the call, every time, no matter the odds. And that would have to be enough.